So good morning. I'm Andrea Spencer, and I am Vice President of Communications at ElderSource here in Northeast Florida. And I would like to welcome you to the 2021 World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. It is important for us to be here today and listen to some of this great information that's going to be shared with us by some subject matter experts. So I'd like to introduce our CEO here at ElderSource to give us the official greeting for the event. Thanks, Linda Levin, CEO of ElderSource.
Thank you, Andrea. Hold on 1 minute. Sorry, that's my phone ringing. Good morning. Hello, everyone. As Andrea said, I am CEO of ElderSource, the Area Agency on Aging and Aging and Disability Resource Center for Northeast Florida. And I want to welcome you to this morning's webinar, Elder Abuse. It's more than just scams. We have over 200 people registered for today's event as more people join. And the event is also being recorded and will be available for reviewing later. But today is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. An estimated 5 million seniors experience abuse each year, while only 1 in 14 cases is reported. I hope today's session gives you and the ones you love the information and empowerment to protect yourself and themselves against scams and abuse. This workshop is presented by ElderSource, as we mentioned, but in partnership with Senior Connection Center, the Area Agency on Aging of Southwest Florida, and the Area Agency on Aging for Palm Beach Treasure Coast. We thank you for joining us today and for this very important workshop, and I hope you have a great day. Stay safe and stay well. Thank you.
Linda, thank you. Good morning. We are still letting folks into the waiting room. There's over 100 people that are joining us, but I want to go through a few housekeeping items so we can keep this on track and all of you can feel connected to this very, very important topic. Please note that the session is being recorded and it will be posted to our website following this event. And for all of those who are not able to attend, you will receive an email and you can share that link to the event following today's program. Please remain muted and your camera turned off. Turn on the speaker view in the upper right-hand corner and you'll have a better view of the speakers that will be presenting today. Please, at the very end, we're going to leave all the questions to the end. Type your questions into the chat box and we will monitor them and share those questions with our speakers. So due to the number of attendees, we may run into a couple technical difficulties. As always, please be patient and we will fix any issues as soon as we can. I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues who is going to introduce our first speaker for today. And can we thank Linda? And so we have got our folks, our partner agencies who are presenting today. So welcome.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Maricela Morado. I'm the Director of Programs and Planning at the Area Agency on Aging for Southwest Florida. And it's a pleasure to introduce Meg Dalibus, who is the Director of Community Education and Development for Abuse Counseling and Treatment, also known as ACT. In her role, Meg oversees ACT's Violence Prevention Program and community outreach initiatives to increase awareness on the dynamics of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and sex trafficking in Lee, Hendry, and Glades counties. Meg facilitates trainings for social services, healthcare professionals, law enforcement, and other direct service providers. In addition to being a certified domestic and sexual violence advocate, she is the authorized trainer of domestic violence core competency per the Florida Department of Children and Families Domestic Violence Program, and the training supervisor of the Sexual Assault Advocacy Core Training per the Florida Coalition Against Sexual Violence. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you, Maricela. Good morning, everyone. Since we're online, let me just check. Can everyone hear me? Awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Betty. I'm really grateful to be here. I know we're going to start with this, heavy-hearted subject, but all of this morning is so important for those of you who care for our community members, and I'm grateful you're here. I did put a content warning that we're going to be talking about some examples of domestic and sexual violence, so just make sure you're taking care of yourself and do what you need to do for yourself as well. We're going to be sharing about great resources, though. So today we're talking about elder abuse, specifically interpersonal violence in later life. This is different than caregiver stress. This is different than someone having a bad day and being a jerk. I like to say, do you remember in 9th and 10th grade when you went from biology and pre-algebra to your class on healthy relationships and respect and consent? And no, none of us have had that class. There is no universal class. There is no formal education. Many of us don't know or have this education on what is violence, what is going on in the minds of the people who are perpetrating this abuse, especially on vulnerable people, especially on people they're supposed to love and care about. And so we want to have some understanding of why that violence works and how it looks so that we can recognize it better, so that we cannot make excuses for it, so that we can best support the people who are being abused, and that we can especially understand some of these finer complications when we're looking at our elder community. Alex, if you can bring us to the next slide. I don't like to stay in statistic land, but I want to just point out how prevalent intimate partner violence, domestic violence, and sexual assault is in our community. And every time we're looking at statistics, we want to keep in mind that underrepresented groups are usually missing out, and that includes our elders. So in general, we're looking at 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men who have experienced intimate partner violence and have reported an impact from it. Those are really high numbers. For sexual assault, the national organization estimates that every 73 seconds, someone is sexually assaulted. And as Linda pointed out earlier, especially if you can go to the next slide, Alex, what we have to keep in mind is that there's underreporting of domestic and sexual violence. And so in our elder community, for every 1 case that's reported, there could be 24 abuse cases that aren't. And having our eyes open, understanding these dynamics can help us be better caregivers, be better professionals, be better family members and bystanders. Many of us who may be a little familiar with domestic violence or just have heard it often think about physical violence. But what we want to keep in mind, especially in relationships, new relationships for elders, established relationships, marriages, all across the board, is that it's not just physical violence. In fact, domestic violence is about power and control. When we say that, we mean one person in a relationship thinks that they are entitled to control the other partner. They feel justified in their actions. They feel like I am, in a lot of cases, I am the man, I am the husband, I am the male authority in the relationship, I'm the head of the household, and that the next person is supposed to be more in a servant role. They have these gendered roles that are really enforced. They're supposed to cook, they're supposed to clean, they're supposed to provide all the emotional labor for me. And there's this sense of entitlement that this is the way relationships look. And so they feel entitled to try to control that person. So there can be physical violence. There often is, but it can be intermittent. It can be every once in a while. But there are a lot of ways that someone can try to control a person. And we're going to look at that and why that is, and realize that it tends to show up as a pattern. Because if this is the way that that person believes and thinks, and they feel justified in their actions, and they feel like they're allowed to control this other person, where they go, what they do, who they spend time with, how they control the finances, if they have access to the finances, their different activities, whether they are involved in social or religious activities, feeling entitled to control all that and to use abuse to keep that control inevitably shows up in a pattern. It shows up in a variety of different ways. And so it's a pattern of abusive behavior, and it is meant to have power and control over another intimate partner. And here's all the different ways that can look. Physical violence, sexual violence, emotional and verbal abuse, very, very prominent. Economic abuse, financially controlling someone, sabotaging their finances like their credit or coercing debt. Psychological actions, different mind games, disbelieving that person, minimizing the hurt that they've caused against that person, telling them they're just overreacting or they're crazy. And it includes any behaviors that can intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame, hurt, injured, wound. The list goes on. And so it's important that we expand our definition of what does that violence and abuse look like, to realize that it's about coercive control. So if Alex brings up the next quote for me, we have coercive control, that coercion. It's much more insidious than just manipulation, I feel like it captures. It's a strategic course of oppressive behavior designed to deprive victims of their rights and liberties by establishing a regime of domination in someone's personal life. And so this can look like taking someone's hearing aids away so that they're not able to communicate. This can look like hiding or taking away medication. This can look like ignoring a doctor or caregiver's advice on purpose. Coercive control is a way to just, again, expand our definition of what violence looks like, to understand that it's a variety of different methods someone uses to control that other person, and they feel entitled to do that. And they look like regular old people. They can be very charming. They can be, looks like the best husband, seems like the best wife. And so it can be very confusing. But when we have some of this information and we can start to recognize some of the signs, I think the next slide has a wheel. We're a fan of wheels. It's a little bit fuzzy perhaps, but I just thought this was the best one. If you look up any power and control wheels, you'll get this PowerPoint and a follow-up afterwards. What the power and control wheel shows is that you have physical and sexual violence on the outside. Physical and sexual violence might be more obvious. What you have on the very center is control. The entitlement to try to control someone holds it all together. But it's these things on the inside of the wheel that can be more subtle. It can be something that a victim doesn't necessarily recognize as abuse. It can be something that is really effective, and I hate to use the word effective, but when a perpetrator is trying to control that person, they can use any of these methods. And so we have threats and intimidation. We have financial exploitation, misuse of privilege. So again, well, I'm the one who works and brings in the money. All the financial decisions are mine, different things like that. Isolation. This can be physical isolation, but it can be, again, not letting someone partake in activities that are important to them, like their faith or their friend group, different social activities, going to bridge, all those things. Manipulating the family, so spreading lies or bad information, or just trying to charm other people in the family, kind of using the kids against the person. Emotional and verbal abuse, we can't stress enough. It doesn't tend to be taken as seriously, even though it's very harmful. Humiliating, degrading, ridiculing. I'll have victims come up and share with me afterwards. It's just, you could never do anything right. You couldn't load the dishwasher right. You couldn't clean the floors right. Making them think they're crazy. So any of these, the part I want to point out, and there's more to study here. We only have a short time together this morning. But the reason those things inside the wheel are so quote unquote effective for an abuser to use is because they're attached to someone being afraid for their physical safety or being afraid for their sexual safety. So there may not need to be physical violence or sexual violence more than once or not at all if using emotional and verbal abuse makes someone afraid physically, if isolating someone, financially mistreating them, ends up physically hurting them or reminding them that they could be physically hurt or sexually abused. And so all these different methods are part of what we look at when we're looking at violence. And a lot of people look at this wheel and they go, oh my gosh, because they start to realize it's not just an abuser who had a bad day. It's not just because he drinks too much and loses control. It's not just because they're stressed, but it is because they have this belief system and this sense of entitlement that it's okay to perpetrate abuse in order to keep their power and control. And we're going to come back to this, but I'm going to segue to sexual violence now. If we can go to the next slide. Alex can put up all the definitions. I just chose a couple different ones because each of them had different things I thought were important. But sexual abuse is any kind of sexual contact without that person's consent. Now, we're not going to be able to go into all the nuances involved with Alzheimer's, dementia, and different aging and how that affects the ability to give consent. I have a really great resource I recommend to everyone, even though it comes from the state of Pennsylvania and some of the stuff it mentions may not be specific to Florida. It's a great resource that's going to get emailed out and followed up to y'all that kind of goes over some of these nuances of understanding consent. But anytime someone is forced or just tricked, coerced, manipulated, they're made to cooperate to some sort of sexual contact, that's sexual violence. And then next we have whether they have the capacity to give consent. So physical and sexual abuse signs. Something you want to keep in mind when we share these warning signs is that sometimes there are no signs. Many times for victims, there can be just some psychological signs or not. Some people can have some anxiety, headaches, and stomach aches, but not really explicit signs. So some things to keep in mind are if they report it, if there's bruises, tears, unexplained injuries. You can keep going, Alex. If someone, Alex, if you can let me know too, I had on the agenda 10:25, but now I see if you can let me know the exact time.
Yeah, you have
some other
5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Some other warning signs that might be a little bit more common are going to be any emotional distress, being withdrawn from activities in their daily life, maybe not as communicative, unusual behaviors that may seem like regression, lack of self-care, feelings of despair, and really any of those circumstances you saw on that wheel or may hear about. And of course, having a partner or a family member or someone who is overbearing and always insists on being present and speaks for them or over them can be a sign. Next slide. So what we wanted to make sure was a good takeaway for y'all is I'm coming from Southwest Florida, but for those who aren't here, you can go to the next slide, Alex. Get in touch and know your local domestic and sexual violence centers. So they're the folks who are going to specialize in domestic and sexual violence. And I've heard so many incredible stories of advocates being able to help not only elders, but people who are taking care of elders. There's a lot of things we have to keep in mind. There can be the inability to report. They can be dependent upon the person abusing them for their basic needs. They can be afraid of retaliation, many different things. And so what are some things you can do? You can go to the next slide, Alex. Of course, since we're mandatory reporters of if adults are incompetent or different elders, we want to keep that in mind. So on to the next slide, and there's a mandatory reporting slide at the very end of this presentation as well, once everybody goes. So some things you want to keep in mind is when you're talking with someone and sharing with someone, we do recommend that you're honest about your limitations of what you can be confidential about. If you can go to the next slide, Alex. But you want to be a good listener. You want to validate. You want to focus on listening. Make eye contact. Say things like, I believe you. This wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything to deserve this. But you want to avoid criticizing the person who may have abused them, especially if it's a partner, a family member, a child in the family, different things like that. So not criticizing that person, but saying things like, you don't deserve to feel this way, or I want to make sure you're safe. I'm worried about you. Another thing on the next slide is to be aware of different resources. Oh, sorry, one more back. So with any of these forms of violence, someone has had the ability to have control over their own life taken away from them. So to the extent that is possible with an elder in a safe way, in a legal, ethical way, you want to provide them options and resources, but let them make the decisions on what they think is safe and best for them without pressuring them into doing something that they don't feel safe or is best. Again, to the extent that is possible for someone's situation. Know your different resources. So there's different domestic and sexual violence centers all across the state. So I did put the Florida state level hotlines here. This is something that even just you can call when you have a question, when you're not sure about something. And it's also the number to give to a victim so that they can have a confidential advocate to talk to. And thank you for someone throwing in the abuse hotline too. So you have your domestic violence hotline for the state of Florida is through DCF, and you have your sexual violence hotline that's through the state of Florida, which is FCASB. So I know that was a real quick breeze through. We're going to have time for Q&A at the end, and this resource will be shared with you, the PowerPoint, as well as a follow-up document on those things I mentioned on different nuances with Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. And here's an example of some services that a local center does.
Meg, thank you. You can certainly tell that you are a subject matter expert, so we really appreciate you being here with us today. I think there's quite a few people that started or joined us after the start of the program, and just as a reminder, this particular presentation and the handouts and resources that are going to be available will be sent to you in a link, a follow-up link, and of course anyone who has not been able to join us today but did sign up will get that as well. So please continue to share this information. It's very, very important. I want to introduce another colleague of mine, Jamil Edney, and he is with the Treasure Coast Palm Beach Area Agency on Aging. So he's going to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jamil Edney, and I am the Elder Rights Coordinator at the Area Agency on Aging in West Palm Beach, Florida, and we do serve seniors in Palm Beach County and Treasure Coast. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker. She is a Community Development Supervisor at I Think Financial Credit Union. She has been with the credit union for about 13 years, and she specializes in all areas of banking, from lending to compliance, and she enjoys educating the community and helping them with their financial needs. So please welcome Mrs. Tiffany Flood.
Thank you. We're excited. I'm excited to be here today and kind of share some knowledge. The credit union is huge on educating the community. We have had cases of elder abuse in our branches before, so all of our employees go through training on how to help our senior members when they're coming in, how to spot it. How to see, if somebody's taking advantage of them, if they're bringing in checks, or if the caregivers are, trying to do something on the accounts, and we have reported it before and we have caught it. So this is a huge part of what the financial industry deals with, trying to make sure that nobody takes advantage of our elders. So we're going to kind of cover today identity theft and credit fraud. This is a huge part, especially our senior community, different things that happen to them. And we have our call center all the time. They are asking certain questions to make sure that they're not being involved in a scam, or somebody is not trying to steal money from our seniors, because they are very vulnerable. A lot of times if somebody calls some seniors and they ask information over the phone, they unfortunately are willing to give it out more than our younger community. So we're going to cover what identity theft is, how they get your personal information, how you can minimize your risk, signs that you are a victim. So maybe you don't even know you're being taken advantage of. So what are the signs? And then what to do if your identity is stolen. So identity theft would be anytime somebody is using your identity to either get loans or to benefit from you as a person. So if they're using your name, your social security number, any of your credit cards, or other information without your permission. So that's why I say sometimes, when we have these caregivers, I'm not saying, every caregiver is bad, obviously, but we do have to watch out because some do take advantage of our elder community. So whenever you have somebody that's writing checks for you or has access to any of your financial information, you just have to be careful. And any of the family that, has an elder family member and they have caregivers coming in, you have to remember that any of this stuff should be kept confidential, just because they can use it and you might not even know for months that money is being withdrawn from the accounts or checks are being written. So you should be helping your elder family members, reviewing their accounts with them, making sure you know what purchases are, what checks are going through, and just keeping an eye on it, because there's so many ways to withdraw money from accounts now, ACHs, with everything debits online, and usually our older community, they will review their statements, but the statements, they come out, 30 days past. They're not looking up everything on the apps or looking up their stuff every day. So you should definitely, educate your elder family members, or go through it with them, show them how to download the apps on the phone for their bank so they can pull up their statements, and kind of see what's going on. And of course, if you have somebody that, has a power of attorney, you want to make sure that they're using it the correct way and they're not taking advantage. So your identity can be stolen a couple different ways. They can take records from your employer. A huge one with the elder community is computer hacking. They don't realize that once they get these viruses on their computers, that your password can be stolen simply by your keystrokes. That's why it's so important to do uppercase, lowercase, different symbols, because they put these programs in your computer and they can figure out your password simply by what you're typing, okay? They could steal your purse, your wallet, your checkbook that has your information on there. They're gonna have your ID, they're gonna have your account number. Keep in mind, if you have checks, your account number is on your checks, your routing number is on there. That's all somebody needs to go online and put in an ACH to have money come out of your account. They can steal your mail. So if you have a lot of mail coming where you're getting pre-approved for stuff, you would want to opt out of that, because you don't want a ton of mail coming where they can take it and get pre-approved for offers that are supposed to be coming to you. They can go through your trash. That's why we always recommend shredding stuff. We have our shred days twice a year. You can always drop stuff off at any of your credit union branches. We will help you shred it. They can look behind your shoulder at ATMs. So when you're taking money out, they can get your PIN number. A lot of times people will use the last 4 of their social for their PIN. Don't do that. Anything that can be easily guessed, like your birthday or your social, do not use for your PIN number, because that's very easy. Once they get a hold of that card, they're going to have your PIN. They can take out everything. They can also call you and pose as your landlord or your employer to obtain credit reports. They could call you and say, hey, your rent's due, you didn't pay it, this is so-and-so, I'm going to need more information from you to make sure that you're going to pay it next month, or different things like that. The crooks are very smart. They're as smart as the people that are trying to stop them. So some people pick that life and some people pick the life of not being a crook. So don't think, that they're not smart. They are very smart. They can also change your address. So they can fill out a change of address with the post office, try to divert your mail so they get information on you. They can try to phish you, which is what I was talking about on the internet, where they put a program on your computer. So when you're typing in your password, they can steal it just by the keystrokes. They can try to bish you, which means they are trying to get information from you over the phone. So they're calling, pretending they're your bank or pretending they're your credit union or somebody you trust, and saying, your information was compromised. I need you to verify this, this, and that. If somebody ever calls you asking for information, you call their main number back and speak to somebody that way. Never give information over the phone from somebody that's calling you, okay? Also, they can skim your credit cards. That would be a way that they can use your credit cards and make purchases online. So skimming credit cards would be at gas stations, at ATM machines. You always have to look where you're going and make sure it looks like it should normally look. A skimming machine would be a piece of plastic over it that's stealing your card information. And then what they do is they make their own card with your information on it and they go on a shopping spree. So that's why I say it's so important not to just check that statement once a month. You should be checking it every couple of days, because technology, how it is, very quickly somebody can clean out your accounts. So who is most vulnerable? This is what I keep saying, the elderly. A lot of times they will have a company call them and say, this is the IRS, this is Social Security, we're going to stop your checks if you don't verify this information with us. And the elderly, of course, they don't want their checks to be stopped. So they kind of panic and they will give their information out. And then it just ends up that it was never the Social Security Administration calling. It was never the IRS calling. They're not going to call you. They're going to send you mail if they need to communicate with you. So it just becomes a huge part, of just education, and don't give that information out on the phone. Also, uninformed consumers, if they don't have precautions, if they're just telling their information to anybody that calls, or if you're going to websites that are shady and you don't have any virus or malware on your computer or your tablet, and then not questioning why somebody's asking your personal information. Oh, you should always be able to call them back. If somebody's pushing you, you should just hang up. You can always call back and you can ask for somebody to talk to, and then you're at least calling the correct company. So that's very, very important. So how big is the problem? Over 330,000 Americans reported to the Federal Trade Commission that they were a victim of identity fraud. And this is back from 2014. So as you can imagine, those numbers have only gone up. Identity theft was the #1 complaint for the 15th year in a row made to the Federal Trade Commission. And I can tell you right now, Florida is #1 for identity theft. The reason being is we have a large senior community down here. And when people are calling, they are targeting that community. So they know that they're a little bit more worried about their finances. And they know that they're a little bit more apt to give out their information on the phone than the younger community. So Florida has been #1 for about 10 years in a row. And basically, I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And if somebody does use your credit card, I see a little question down there, it is considered identity theft because they are pretending they are you to use that credit card, okay? So they're using your credit card number that was issued to you that you signed for. And credit card companies most of the time will take care of it, but when you sign that contract with that credit card company, usually they'll have a time frame they'll take care of it for. So for example, somebody gets your credit card and they charge up a large amount of money and you don't see it and it passes 90 days. Well, then you could be responsible for that money, even if you didn't use it. That's why I say looking at the statements are so important. Every credit card company is going to have a reporting time frame. I know at the credit union, ours is 90 days. If you don't let us know within 90 days, you're responsible for whatever was put on your credit card. And you do sign that contract when you open up that account. So how can you protect yourself? Only use the secure websites. Be wary of any email links. This is something that's huge that's going on right now. A lot of places are sending an email link. They're saying your UPS package wasn't delivered. Whatever is their ploy, you click on the UPS package link. It's a bogus link. Now you have malware on your computer. So anytime you open up any emails and you don't know who they're from, even if it says AT&T and you have an AT&T phone, that doesn't mean it's from AT&T. You can hover over the email address and make sure that it actually says, it's from AT&T. But you should never be clicking links in emails ever. AT&T contacts you, great. You go to AT&T's site, you contact them that way. You do not click on the links in their emails. You can go to this website, the www.onguardonline.gov. They have more ideas. You can put your antivirus spyware on your computers. You can always be looking on the gas pumps, inspecting your ATM machines you're using. If you're not sure, you can go inside the gas station and ask the person, hey, is this what it's supposed to look like? I feel like it looks a little strange. We actually have had members catch spyware and scammers on the gas pumps and come in and tell us, hey, don't go to this, gas station, Chevron on whatever, there was a scanner there. So you can be empowered. You just have to, take charge. And if something doesn't look right, it probably is not. You can shred your confidential documents. This would include anything that has your date of birth, your social. You can, when you're going and doing medical visits, keep in mind you don't have to put your social on that type of paperwork, so you can be picky on what you're putting your social on, really only if you are like applying for credit or anything like that should you use your social opening up a new account. And then don't utilize the auto login features, because if somebody hacks into your computer, they don't even need to look at your keystrokes. They're going to be able to log into everything. Okay. They can open up any website you were on and they will automatically be logged in as if they are you. So you can also check your credit report annually. If you go to our website, we do have a link. It's very important you don't go to freecreditreport.com. You want to go to annualcreditreport.com. That's the one the government gives you for free each year. Make sure also you're opening all mail. Just because it looks like junk, you don't know if it's coming. If your name is Tom Smith and all of a sudden Susie Lou was approved for a credit card and it's coming to your address. So make sure you open up all your mail. Check your account statements as much as possible. Use credit monitoring tools if you can. A lot of these will notify you when your credit has been pulled, and keep your passwords secure. Don't, I know sometimes you say, well, I have to write it down. I have to do this. If you're writing it down, keep it under lock and key, keep it somewhere safe that somebody that's cleaning your house or helping take care of you cannot find it. So these are the times you want to give your social security number when you're doing something at your credit union or your bank, when you're applying for jobs or your employer, for your income taxes, your car registration, any credit bureau reports, college records, and loan applications. So you'll notice on that list, it doesn't say anything about doctors, hospitals, medicals. They don't need your social in order to assist you. Your name, date of birth, address should be more than enough for them. You can refuse it over the phone always. Never put it on personal checks, obviously, or your driver's license, and never use it as your ID for store purchases or for general identification. So your social should be something you have memorized, but it's at home locked up somewhere so nobody can get a hold of it. So signs you became a victim, maybe you don't even know you're a victim. These are some signs to look for. Of course, if you get a statement that contains charges that you did not do, or if your statements stop arriving, maybe you're getting mailed statements and all of a sudden you're not, and you're like, well, what's going on? No mail received for several days. They could have changed your address at the US Post Office so they can get your mail. If you're receiving any letters that say, hey, you were denied for credit and you didn't apply for anything, any notices or deliveries that you didn't request.
Hold on 1 second. I'm on a, I need to mute this. Okay. Yeah, this is Marietta. Hi.
Uh-oh, I think somebody's not muted.
Hello, if you could, thank you for muting. Thank you.
Okay, so any goods or services you didn't request. For example, I got a notice the other day. I used UPS because I got an email that said your UPS package was delivered. I didn't order anything from UPS. So I knew right away, delete that email. Don't think about it again. Any credit collection agencies that are trying to call you and collect debts that aren't yours. And then sometimes you're not going to notice any. And it's going to take a while for you to pick up on it. That's why I say to check on your statements, pull your credit, 3-4 times a year, make sure there's nothing on there that is not you. So if you are a victim, you can contact the Federal Trade Commission's identity theft hotline, report yourself. You're going to want to notify the credit bureau. You can now just notify one credit bureau and they will notify the other two. That's part of the Fair Consumer Credit Reporting Act that was signed into law. Notify any of your credit card companies. That way you can review your transactions with them, make sure they weren't affected. Contact the Social Security Administration and make sure you notify them. You can file a report with local police if it's $500 or more. You're going to need that for any of your credit card companies or banks for them to help you and refund any of your money if it's over $500. And then also get copies of the police reports and send them out. And you can file a police report even if you don't know who's doing it. You're simply stating somebody's doing it. I don't know who. You're going to definitely need that police report though to get all your money back and everything taken care of. And then these are some additional resources you can use. I know they said they're sending this presentation out, so anybody that needs these, they are on here for you to use. You can do a credit monitoring program. Like I said, we do offer one. It monitors your Experian credit report, and it's $1.90 a month with the credit union. There's other companies that also offer it. It's really good to have one, because what happens is when somebody pulls your credit or tries to apply for something, it automatically emails you and says, hey, somebody pulled your credit. You know, you want to go ahead and check that. So you'll know right away if you're being a victim of identity theft, because if you didn't apply for something, your credit should not have been pulled. And then these are just additional resources. I was talking about, you can opt out of the pre-approval offer, so they're not mailing anything to your home. So you can go ahead on there and put that, or you can become part of the Do Not Call Registry. Then you don't have to worry about solicitors calling you and asking for information. And then just make sure you know that your firewalls are up to date, your virus protection's up to date. Make sure that you're using a bank or credit union that also does that. They have everything encrypted. That way you're not opening yourself up to fraud. And then if you have any questions, I'll take them at the end. I will be on until the end. So if you have anything you're thinking of, just let me know after.
Tiffany, thank you. These are always the burning questions about how to protect yourself in the best ways. Your tips were great. Thank you for staying on. We did have questions in the chat, and if we will go back and review those and bring the panel back for discussion to answer your questions during that time. Our last speaker is going to be introduced by my colleague out in Tampa Bay, and her name is Patricia Henderson with Senior Connection Center. Thanks, Patricia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Patricia Henderson. I am the Outreach Manager and Community Liaison for Senior Connection Center, and we cover Hillsborough, Manatee, Polk, Highlands, and Hardee counties. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce Damian Crable. Damian is a postal inspector for the United States Postal Inspection Service at the Tampa, Florida field office. He graduated with a law degree from the University of Florida in 2003 and practiced law for 11 years, with the last 7 as an assistant state attorney for the 6th Judicial Circuit of Florida. Damian then successfully completed basic inspector training in Potomac, Maryland, and has worked for the U.S. Postal Inspection Service as a postal inspector since 2015. Postal inspectors are federal law enforcement agents that investigate crimes involving the mail, such as fraud, mail theft, package bombs, child exploitation, and the shipment of illegal narcotics. Damian, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, and yeah, great introduction. So as Patricia said, I'm a U.S. Postal Inspector. One of my first questions when it's live is I ask everybody to raise their hand for who's heard of my agency. And I usually get a handful, but we've been around a really long time. Ben Franklin picked the first of my predecessors before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and we've been enforcing law since that time. My main focus, as Patricia mentioned, we investigate narcotics in the mail, package bombs, theft of mail. We cover a lot of different areas. My main focus is fraud. So I do complex fraud investigations. I work with the FBI, the Secret Service, the IRS, other federal and state agencies to do what we can to minimize consumer fraud and put those who perpetrate it in prison. So my goal today is to explain to you some of the most common fraud trends that I see affecting citizens generally, and specifically the elderly. And I'm also going to talk about some of the ways that I've seen that I believe are most effective at countering those fraud schemes. I think the education is vitally important, and I think in some respects, our time here is almost better spent than the investigation, because that can take me 2 years investigating a case to put a handful of people in prison. But if I can convince 100 people that the guy calling you on the phone saying you've won Publishers Clearinghouse isn't really from Publishers Clearinghouse, well, I can prevent a lot of that money from going overseas and saving those people. So one thing I would ask all of you to do is, if you think that you've learned a few things from me or the other presenters today, is make sure you share that with your friends and family, and also be good advocates for your friends and family. And now that you've been empowered with some of that information, to look out for them and notice things with them where you could step in and say, hey, have you actually met that person for real? You know, those kinds of things. I want to say I was very happy to hear, just as an aside, Tiffany presenting about her credit union and how she and her staff are trained to look out for these kind of things. Not all banks do that. So I've certainly encountered situations where banks are happy to hand a 95-year-old $50,000 in cash without any questions asked. It's just fantastic to hear that there are more people advocating for our citizens. So I'm going to go quickly through some types of scams that I've seen personally. Veteran fraud is one we talk about. It isn't necessarily a specific scam. It focuses on the, you can look at the military as kind of like a large fraternity. And so with that, you have a sense of trust when somebody else represents themselves as a military member. And so they use that sort of trust, that built-in trust, to take advantage of veterans. And a lot of that can be in these other type of scams that I'll talk about, but you also see specific like loan scams. For example, somebody might say that this loan at this rate is only available to you because you're in the military, and in reality, they're just trying to harvest personal information or just totally scam you out of money. So that's something to be vigilant about, and through all of these, is verifying the identity of the person you're dealing with before you give any information or any money. The lottery and sweepstakes scam is just indescribably pervasive and popular. I've seen some estimates that there are billions of dollars a year flowing from American seniors to other countries through the lottery and sweepstakes scam. And the way that usually plays out is that you get a call saying that we're from Publishers Clearinghouse or some lottery and you've won, but before you can collect your winnings, you have to pay taxes. And so they get the senior to, or anybody, because I've certainly seen non-seniors convinced of this, to send money. And that'll be in the form of a check, a money order, a postal money order. Sometimes we see envelopes stuffed with tens of thousands of dollars in cash. And obviously there's no winnings, there's no taxes. You don't have to pay taxes before you collect anything. The IRS, you have to pay your taxes April 15th every year. You don't, it just doesn't work that way. You don't prepay taxes. But what they do is they'll say, okay, you owe $5,000 in taxes, you pay it, and then they'll call you back and say, oh, there's a new import duty, or the money's coming from California and they have an additional regulation, so we'll need another $4,000. And they'll do that. Sometimes I've seen over the course of years. And you may have a victim that eventually has no money left. Some of them have taken out home equity loans, so now their home is on the line. They've maxed out the cash advances with their credit cards. They have nothing left. And then the scammer will turn them into a money launderer. They'll say, we found sponsors for you to help you pay your taxes. And in that way, the victim will start receiving money or checks in the mail from other victims, and they'll redirect it as commanded by the overseas scammer. And in that way, they're laundering money. So they're committing the federal crime of money laundering and helping the bad guys take advantage of other victims. So unfortunately, that's very, very common. Another one, romance scams. I've seen a little bit of an uptick in this, especially over the last year due to COVID. We see a lot of widows and widowers isolated, and many of them very understandably go online or are very susceptible to somebody approaching them online and expressing romantic interest. That can be through Facebook. It can be you go on a website, an otherwise legitimate online dating website, but there are scammers that have fake profiles on there. And they are very, very adept at gaining somebody's trust. But eventually, the way all these work is there will be some reason why they need monetary assistance. Many times they prey on that person who's just very desperate to have a physical contact or romantic contact, and they'll say, I would love to come visit you, but my employer isn't paying me right now. I just need $5,000 and I can pay for that flight to come and visit you. And everybody will dutifully pay that, and there will always be a reason. Oh, I got in a car accident on the way to the airport, and now I have medical bills that I can't pay. Can you send another $7,000? And again, they just bleed them and bleed them. I've seen some of these people turned into launderers as well. They start receiving money from other victims, and then they get this particular scam. You see a lot of Bitcoin transactions. So you'll have a victim turned money launderer that will start receiving money from other victims, and they'll get very specific instructions on how to convert that into Bitcoin and send it to a wallet owned by the overseas scammer. Government impersonation is kind of a larger catch-all category. One of the most popular ones over the past few years was IRS, and that was where you would get a call from somebody purporting to be with the IRS and saying your taxes are late, you owe money to the IRS. If you don't pay this right away, we're going to come and arrest you. And you can see why for some people the threat of arrest would be very motivating, and then a lot of the people they call might actually have some tax issues. And so it might even be more believable to them. And if they make enough phone calls, they're sure to get a certain amount of the population that is very susceptible to this. If the people are a little bit vigilant and they say, no, you're not from the IRS, they'll call back and they'll spoof the caller ID. So the next call will be from a local law enforcement agency. So for example, if you're a resident of Pasco County and you get one of these calls and you tell them, this is garbage, you're not from the IRS, you're not coming to arrest me. The next call, they'll know you're in Pasco County. The next call will be from a number that looks like it's the Pasco County Sheriff, and your caller ID will say Pasco County Sheriff. And they'll have somebody say, I'm Lieutenant Dan with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office. We're coming to arrest you if you don't pay this right away. And you can understand why somebody, especially without a support system, might be very quick to pay that. And with this scam, we've seen people pawn their jewelry, mortgage their house, do whatever they can, because nobody wants to go to prison. And you even see circumstances where the victims are purchasing Google Play and Apple iTunes gift cards and providing that information to the bad guys over the phone. And you initially might be judgmental. What sort of an idiot would buy Apple iTunes gift cards and think that they're going to pay the IRS with that? But I've taken these calls and I've stayed on the line posing as a victim. And they're extremely convincing. They do this all day long. They're very, very adept at this. And they convince people that this is an acceptable way to pay your taxes. Then the other most recent government impersonation scam is through the Social Security Administration. And this is another call I've received personally, and I stay on the phone with them as long as I can just to hear what they have to say. And it syncs up with what victims are telling me. And they'll call. We'll say we're with the Social Security Administration, your name and information was found in a car on the Texas border, and it contained drugs and blood. And we're gonna freeze all of the accounts associated with your Social Security number. So what you need to do is we're here to help you transfer all of your funds into a government protected account, so that we know that's all of your legitimate funds and not the funds of the drug dealer who is posing as you. And you see victims lose everything because they hand over all of the money from all of their accounts. And once it's out of the country, it's gone. Many of the countries that do this don't have extradition agreements with us. And even the ones that do, it's just very, very difficult for somebody such as me to find the bad guys in another country. We pick off the people in the United States that cooperate with this, but they're easily replaceable. So again, you just have to be vigilant and look out for yourself and others. The last fraud scam that I encounter a lot that is ongoing is the tech support scam. And that can be either through, you go to a bad website and there's a pop-up message that says your computer's infected, call Microsoft at this number, or you'll get a cold call that says, we're from Microsoft, we notice your computer has viruses, let us help you. And they'll talk to you and convince you to allow them to remotely access your computer. They'll take you step by step through it. So even computer novices, they'll tell you exactly what to do. Then they remotely access your computer. They show you a bunch of things that they say are bad. They're not. They just bring up things that normal non-tech people don't understand, and they'll say this is evidence of Chinese hacking or something. And best case, they'll convince the victim that they need to pay for a protection plan. So they'll protect you from the hackers. Worst case, while they're in your computer, they'll examine it for your private information and use that to commit identity theft. A lot of times that converts into a refund scam, whereby they'll call back later and they'll say, you paid $1,500 to us last year for a protection plan, but we're going out of business now, and we want to refund you the money. And again, they'll convince you to remotely access your computer. They'll have you log into your bank account while they're accessing your computer. And then they'll say, okay, we refunded the money. What does it look like? And what you don't know as the victim is they've edited the web page to make it look like they've refunded $15,000 instead of $1,500. In reality, they've refunded you nothing, but they convinced the victim, oh man, I refunded too much money. I'm going to lose my job if you don't send that back to me right away. And so then the victim takes $15,000 of their own real money and wires it or sends it through some other means to the bad guy. So that's what we call a refund scam. The next thing that's up on the screen is lead lists. And what this part of my discussion is going to be, I have a lot of victims that say, how did they get my information? Why did they call me? And some of it is just cold calling. Some of it is robocalling. I'm sure many of you have answered the phone and it's just dead air and then it hangs up on you. Some of that is robocalling, building lead lists. They confirm that a human is at this phone, and then they can sell that list for more money. They say that here's a list of phone numbers that we confirmed has a human being there. There's plenty of breaches at retailers. You've heard of them in the past. I'm not going to list them, but your information is out there, and you should assume that all of your information is out there. You have to be vigilant about anything that you encounter. But it's hard to protect yourself from, everybody wants to do business with a retailer. Everybody wants to buy things online. So you're kind of reliant upon them to protect you. I'm going to offer a few things that you can actually do to protect yourself, though. Almost every victim I visit has a stack of mail on a table, and it's filled with scammy charities, is what I call them. There are many charities out there. They're totally legitimate. You can look them up online. There's, I think it's called GuideStar. You can see what percentage of a charity's funds go towards actually helping in the way that they say. But there are plenty of charities out there that will take 1-2% of what they bring in and put it towards something good. And the rest of it is administrative and marketing. And a lot of these charities are just building marketing information that they are then happy to resell to whomever. And depending on how much information you give, you can imagine that they have a lot of good information that they can sell. And one other thing is you give $20 to the disabled Native American Indians of Western Oklahoma, something like that. And they don't actually help those people to any great extent. But they've also confirmed for their lead list, here's a sucker who gave us 20 bucks. So now they can sell that information for more money than just a list of people that they're not sure who are willing to donate. And so one of those donations begets another. And that's why we see the giant stacks of the scammy charities. So just be very careful who you donate your money to. One other thing is, I think that helps highlight how to be careful. I'm sure many of you have walked through a mall and seen a drawing for a boat or a jet ski or a car or something like that, and there isn't really any information on what company is putting this on, but you have to fill out a card that has your name and address and age, phone number and email address. If you're not paying for a product and you're not consuming advertising to enjoy a product, you are the product, okay? If you're filling out all that information, you're the product. They may never actually give that boat away, or maybe they give one boat away in the entire country every year. But they're going to take that information, they're going to sell it. Tiffany talked about shredding. One other thing to consider, you can get a crosscut shredder at Amazon or Walmart for 30 bucks. It's a good investment. And you know, if you're wondering, should I shred this? Is it important to shred this? Just shred it. Why not? I mean, just do it. Tiffany mentioned doctors do not need your social security number. And there are so many forms, you've all seen them. Every time you go to a new doctor, you have this big form and it always asks for your social security number. Just ignore it, okay? And if they push back saying, we need you to fill this out, say, I called my insurance company. They told me, I don't need to give that to you. What do you need it for? So don't do that. Annualcreditreport.com, Tiffany also talked about, very important to review that. Also, credit freeze. Freeze your credit. It used to cost $10 with each of the 3 bureaus. Now it's nothing. Congress made it free. And what that does is it locks your credit from a new person opening or anybody opening a new line of credit. It doesn't affect your currently open lines of credit, but there is no reason to have your credit open if you're not actively seeking a new line of credit. So go to each of the 3 bureaus. They don't make it as easy as they should, but Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, go to each of the 3 and freeze your credit. You get a PIN number, or you get a password or something, and only through that, unlocking the credit, can you open a new line of credit. These bureaus have no incentive to protect your information, no duty to you whatsoever, but they have collected everything in the world about you. They know every little thing you've done. And as we saw with, I think it was Equifax not so long ago, they had a huge breach. All of your information is out there. They don't have incentive to have the great security practices. Regarding mail, since that's one thing that I do, it's important, don't let mail sit in your mailbox. If you're going out of town, you can have your mail held at the post office. That's not hard. If your community allows it, you can get a locking mailbox that prevents people from taking mail out of it. And if you're sending anything to somebody else that's important, you can, the most secure ways to do that are handing it to your letter carrier or handing it inside of a post office. You can also use those blue collection boxes. Just look on them. They show on there the last time of day that the mail is picked up. And the point of that is, if it says the mail is last collected every day at 5 p.m., don't put something really important in there at 6 p.m., then it's sitting there overnight. Just some other thoughts. We can go to the next slide. This is just to show, this is tech support scam specifically. It does skew towards seniors, but I think it's important to show that there are plenty of younger people as well. So this isn't just a senior problem, even in something that you think is like tech that might skew even more that way. And have a little bit more I want to cover, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Have a discussion. All of us are going to have it's an uncomfortable conversation, are going to have some measure of cognitive decline at some point, or we're going to be incapacitated for some other reason, a health reason, an accident. Just have a backup plan with somebody you trust, a family member or a friend, where they know where they can find your financial information, where they know that they have access to that. Look out. By sharing some of that information, you allow a child or a family member or a friend to help you prevent being victimized. So have those difficult discussions for sure. These are some ways to report fraud. We saw some of them with prior presenters, but the FTC.gov, I just want to highlight, you report to that either through their phone number or their website, and they're going to collect some information from you. And you think, well, what is my one report going to do? For me, it does a lot. For an investigator like me, if I get an idea that there might be this particular fraud scam, I can use some information of that to search the FTC's database and collect information, find other victims, and really put a good case together. So it takes 30 seconds to go to ftc.gov and report a scam call you received with the phone number and what they said and that kind of stuff. But it's really, really useful. I want to run through a few quick tips. I don't think there are any more slides. That I think are good for personal financial hygiene and personal web hygiene, and that I think are pretty easy for most people to do. Use multiple email addresses. Don't use one email address for talking with trusted friends and family, maybe your banks and your doctors. Then if you want to put enter into some prize drawing or something, have another email address. It's free to go to Google, Microsoft, Yahoo. Just create a new email address and use one for garbage. If you get an email address where there's too much spam, send an email out to all the important people. This is my new email address, and then start using the old one for garbage. That way you're kind of walling off the important stuff of your life and the less important stuff. Tiffany talked a little bit about passwords earlier, and I just want to add to that. That was great advice. Never reuse a password. Never, ever, ever reuse a password. I encounter victims who use the same password for a garbage website they go to, as for their email address, as for their banking. The email address that you use for your banking and everything else is one of the biggest scores if somebody can get that. Because if I go, a lot of banks, you go and you ask for a password reset, the reset link goes to that email address. So if somebody takes control of that email address, they have the keys to your kingdom. So all of these should have a different, complex, long password. And I know that that sounds really difficult and annoying. I use something called a password manager to help me manage it. If you have to write them down, that's, in my opinion, certainly far better than having the same password everywhere. And one way I like to make some analogies, because I think it's not apparent what the problem is to many people. If you're really into, say, fish tanks, and you go to Joe's Discount Fish Tanks and you create an account on Joe's Discount Fish Tanks and you use the same password there as you use at Bank of America, which of those two entities do you think has better security practices, a larger security budget, more trained people protecting their website and consumer information? Obviously, it's Bank of America, right? But the first thing when Joe's Discount Fish Tanks is breached, they're going to start pounding on every big financial institution with your information. And if you use the same password, they're in at Bank of America, okay? And then who knows what they can do. Another way to think about it is, let's say I'm building a house and I have huge, strong walls and power, and the windows are impenetrable, and I have a vault door, it's 8 inches thick steel, but then my back door is a screen door, right? So if you use the same password for everywhere, your personal security is only as strong as the weakest of all those places. So never reuse a password. And if you ever hear there's a breach at a particular location and you did use that password elsewhere, you have to change them everywhere. The Do Not Call Registry, I wanted to mention again, is great. Unfortunately, it only applies for people that obey the law. And all the scams I talked about are foreign call centers. So make sure that you're aware that and absolutely put your name and every number you have, put it on the Do Not Call Registry, but just be aware that there are some limitations. And it doesn't mean that every call you get is then legitimate. And great advice from Tiffany. If you get a call from somebody, I'm with the IRS, I'm with Publishers Clearinghouse, say, okay, but I'm going to verify that myself. Hang up, look up a phone number for those, or if they say it's from your bank, look on the back of your credit card, call your bank back. If they're legitimate, they will totally understand that. I want to reemphasize that. Screen your phone calls. You don't have to answer the phone. A lot of people, especially people that are exceedingly polite, feel like they have to answer the phone. They have to be polite to people. Let it go to voicemail, and then you can hear the person's pitch and decide when you have time to think about it whether or not you should call them back. This way you prevent yourself from being manipulated on the phone in real time by somebody that is so good at it, they do it all day long. Give yourself some breathing room and some time to think about it. If you see an 876 area code, it's from Jamaica. And the only reason I say that it's that important is they are the primary people who run the Publishers Clearinghouse and lottery scams. And 9 times out of 10, when I'm at a victim's home, they get calls from that. I answer the phone and we curse at each other, and then they hang up on me. And then as soon as I leave, they call the victim right back. But that's one thing to be aware of. It's just an example. If you see weird area codes, you don't know anybody there, there's no reason to answer. There's also something called neighbor spoofing. I'm sure you've all seen it. It not only does the incoming call have your same area code, it then has the same 3-digit prefix. And they do that because you automatically think, oh, well, it looks familiar to me, so it's probably legitimate. If you get a call and it has your area code and the next 3 digits are the same as your phone number, it is 100% spam. Unless you for sure know that that phone number is a family member's, don't answer it. There's no reason to do it. I think I already talked about freezing your credit. I want to emphasize that again. It's very easy. I got a couch a couple of years ago. We wanted to take advantage of 0% interest. I asked them, which bureau are you going to check? And they told me Experian or whatever. I unfroze my credit with Experian for a day. They ran it. We got the 0% on the couch, and my credit is locked again. Do that for yourself and all your family. My wife and I, our credit is locked, and it's just very useful. I know that some questions came up while I was talking, and we'll do our best to address them. Thanks so much for listening. I hope that was helpful.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. This is just really, really helpful. We've had a few people who have just joined us or joined us a few minutes ago. I'm going to go back into the chat and kind of start from the way down and ask those questions that were asked during the presentations. So Alex, if you can remove the PowerPoint so we can see our speakers as they address the questions. And I'm going to start, I think this was a question for Tiffany, and you were talking about some of the things that people have already done. How do you go back and fix the things that I don't remember the exact particular slide, but I think there were certain things that you had done with your particular accounts, and you might have, you need to go back and fix them. So do you recall that particular tip that you had offered or information?
So the number one thing you can do if you think you have compromised yourself or you have given out information, you know, that maybe you're realizing now you shouldn't have because it wasn't secure, set yourself up for a credit monitoring company. Everybody knows the name LifeLock. They're a little overpriced as far as I'm concerned. You can actually find it cheaper with your credit card companies. A lot of them will offer it for free, or you can always check with your bank or credit union. But that's the first step, because that's going to notify you if somebody is using your social and is trying to use your credit. And then you can go through, you know, like Damien said, and change your passwords. Create secure passwords for each site. That way, if something has been leaked because you're using the same one everywhere, you know, now they're not going to have it. So go in and change all your passwords. Even with Facebook, you might think something so simple as Facebook, you can be hacked on Facebook and they're looking for personal information. Personal information to these hackers is gold. That's how they can do the fraud. That's how they can steal your identity. So these little questions where they ask you, hey, what's your favorite food on Facebook? And everybody posts, my favorite food is tacos. My favorite food is lasagna. Those questions are on there to figure out what your answers would be when you're answering those questions to log into your financial institutions. Because a lot of time it'll say, what's your favorite food? Mine's sushi, right? So now everybody that knows my favorite food is sushi, if that question pops up when they're logging into my stuff, then they know how to answer it. So it's simple little things like that that you think is a fun game that you would never think they're taking your information. But the more you put out there, the more at risk you are.
Great.
So
Thank
that's
you.
where I would start. Yeah, I would start with the credit monitoring, get yourself set up with something like that, go through, change your passwords, put some malware on your computer to make sure that you don't have anything, you know, negative on there. There's plenty of companies that can help you with that. If you don't know how to do it yourself, you can purchase Norton antivirus, you can go to Best Buy, anything like that, and just make sure you take care of yourself that way.
Great. You had mentioned one of the questions in this chat, name a good identity theft protection service that notifies you anytime your social security number is used. You mentioned LifeLock. Are there others that come to mind?
There's plenty of other ones. Like I was saying, I know I have me, myself personally, obviously the credit union is who I use because I'm an employee there. We give it to any members for $1.90 a month. I know it works because I just got a car. And when I went to apply for my car, the dealership ran a couple different credits and they emailed me each time and said, hey, your credit report was run by this company, your credit report was run by this company, and so on and so forth. In addition, my husband kind of laughs because I have it with Discover as well because they offer it on their cards, and I have it with American Express because they offer it on their cards. And they both do it for free. So Discover offers it free and American Express. So my phone goes ping, ping, ping. I have 3 emails from one pool and they're all from 3 different companies saying, hey, your credit was pulled. Did you do this? So there's plenty of companies that offer it out there. You shouldn't have to pay the $15 to LifeLock. Like I said, credit union $1.90. I know Discover and American Express do it for free. So if you have a card with them, you know, check into that. But there's plenty of places that you can get it.
Great, thank you. I think this was a question that popped up during Damien's. If you lock your credit, can you still check it? So it sounds like, Damien, when you had your credit locked, you went back and unlocked it. But for regular checking, I guess you go back in and check it regularly without you having to lock and unlock. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And I've done that myself personally. Annual credit report as Tiffany put up there earlier and we talked about, is the way to go. That's the government-sponsored site that forced the credit bureaus to give us access to the information they collect about us. And that works while you're, the only thing it does is prevent new lines of credit from being open without, taking that extra step to get that information out of you. So yes, yeah. I wanted to add something for those secret questions that Tiffany was talking about, something I do, and understand I'm wildly paranoid given what I do. So some of the things that I suggest might be a bridge too far for some people, but I don't actually answer. You can, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can deliberately put the wrong answer for a question. I come up with basically another password for that question. Now, again, you have to, I'm not going to remember that, so you have to record it, but there's other things you can do with that that eliminate the problem of, I don't remember if I said what my favorite food was on Facebook 5 years ago, because like Tiffany said, that's out there. And so this way you just come up with a fake answer and then, but obviously you have to keep that because that's the way to get back into your account.
Which kind of leads me to the next question. Is there a safe password manager that you recommend?
I would love to recommend a password manager, but it's really inappropriate for me to as a government employee to recommend a particular company. What I would do with any of these things is do your research, find some legitimate, maybe a news organization that you trust, and find their tech editor who's probably done an article on password managers, and they will give you an idea of the top 3 or 4 that they think are good, and then find a few articles like that, and then just decide on one of those. Right. There are a number of good, reliable ones out there that have what you want to see from a company also like this. If they do have a little bit of security flaw, if they report it immediately, that's a fantastic evidence to me of a good company, because they will all have issues, and you don't want the ones that hide it from you for years. That's something else to look for. Great. But I can't give a specific name for a company.
Okay, thank you for that. And the nonprofit organization Consumer Credit Report, which has the magazine and online, I know that I often turn to them for the reviews and information on what different things that they recommend. All right, going through, this was an interesting question. Why do celebrities endorse Publishers Clearinghouse? If there any opinion about that?
I don't have a particular opinion on it, but I do want to differentiate. Publishers Clearinghouse is a legitimate company, and you can decide for yourself whether or not you think that you have any chance of actually winning when you enter, or if it's statistically more significant than getting killed by an asteroid. I don't know, but it is a legitimate company, and the people that I'm talking about are posing as Publishers Clearinghouse. They'll send letters saying they're from Publishers Clearinghouse. They even use the names of actual executives of Publishers Clearinghouse, but it's fake. Publishers Clearinghouse obeys the law, to my knowledge, and is based in the United States and is subject to our laws and everything. What I was talking about was people faking that they were Publishers Clearinghouse. I don't know. I can't comment on the celebrities though. Okay,
great. We've got quite a few questions, so I want to go through them as best as we can. And if we go over a little bit past 11:30, if you need to log off, by all means, please do. And I'm hoping our guests can stay on maybe just for a little bit longer if we're not able to get through them. One question, why does the different credit agencies have different credit?
So I'll go ahead and answer that one, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible because it's a very detailed answer. The different credit agencies, each company that you have an account with, if you have a loan, like let's say you have a credit card, a car loan, a mortgage, not all companies, they're not required to report to all 3 bureaus. So a particular credit card, let's say Chase, maybe they only report to Experian. So your score is different between Experian and Equifax because they're not getting that extra trade line. So just keep that in mind. They don't have to report to all 3 bureaus. So they code each person, differently. It's not, your score shouldn't vary a huge amount between the 3, but it will vary, a few points between the 3 different ones, depending on what lenders report to. And another thing I just want to cover real quick on that, remember, if you are a victim of identity fraud and you have to contact the credit bureaus, like I said earlier, they now notify each other as well, so you don't have to call all 3. And then something that Damien had covered on earlier, you can freeze your credit. It's a great idea. We have people do it all the time. When you come to open an account at the credit union, we do pull your credit. That's one of the ways we verify who you are. A lot of times when we pull that credit, we will get that freeze. So we will call the person and say, hey, we got a freeze on your credit. Can you go ahead and lift that so we can proceed with the account? They call, get it lifted. Call us back, let us know. We open the account, they put the freeze back on. So it is something you can do. It's very easy for them to lift and unlift it. And it's a secure way to take care of your credit.
Great, thank you. Many of the malware is supposedly based out of foreign countries. Is this a concern? And any recommendations on that? Any knowledge or information about that?
Whether it is or whether it's made in the USA or made abroad, if it's malware, that means it's has negative intent towards you. So the origination of the malware doesn't really bother me. It doesn't affect me a whole lot. The response is the same. I think as Tiffany noted more than once, keep your computer up to date, keep all of your web browser, keeping that up to date is almost as important as keeping your operating system up to date. And that's really, and a lot of the operating systems come with their own virus protection now. That's what I use. I don't personally have an add-on one. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It's just less moving parts as far as I'm concerned. It minimizes complexity, and keeping that all up to date, and not clicking on links that you're not familiar with, and not going to sketchy websites. Beyond that, I don't know that there's a whole lot you can do to protect yourself. If you get an email and you're not sure if it's legitimate or not, and there's a link in it, usually you can put your mouse cursor over it, and in the bottom of your web browser, it'll display the actual web address that link is going to go to, because it can say whatever it wants in that hyperlink. Where it actually sends you to is embedded in the code. But when you mouse over it, it should say where it's going to send you. And if that doesn't sync up, then just go there on your own, type in www.chevrolet.com and go there on your own.
Right.
But beyond that, that's all I have there. I'm not a software or a virus expert per se. I'm a lawyer. I don't.
And here's the next question directed specifically at you, Damien, and maybe you can shed a little light on it. If you've recently renewed your virus protection on your computer, but you're still getting pop-ups saying it is expired, do you need to renew? So do you need to renew? If you've just renewed,
I think there's so many variables there, it's hard to say. That's one of those complexities that I don't encounter because I'm just dealing with the virus software that's built into the operating system. I'm not paying anybody else for it. So I don't personally experience that. One of the problems with going with an outside provider that you pay for is that maybe you pay for their virus protection and then they say, well, your malvertising protection is out of date, or your spyware protection is out of date, and you have to pay extra for that. So you just have to keep track of what you paid for and what you think you owe. It's also possible that pop-up is a separate virus malware that's trying to get you to click on it and pay somebody else money, or to do that remote access scam that I talked about. So without seeing it personally, and without, I'm not a computer security expert, I would just say be very careful about what you click on, and just if you think you paid Norton $50 and that's all you owe, and something pops up that says you owe Norton more, then contact Norton in a separate way. I wouldn't, if you're at all suspicious, don't click on the pop-up.
Right, correct. Do not click. I think we've answered this question. It says, do you have to contact all 3 credit companies to freeze the credit, or contact only one and they let the others know?
Tiffany can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she was addressing a fraud alert earlier. If you do a fraud alert with one, they have to tell the others. The credit freeze, they do not. You have to go to each of the 3 bureaus separately to freeze or unfreeze your credit. Hopefully that was correct.
Correct.
Great. Somebody asked about Credit Karma. Is that a site that you're familiar with? And
I have no problems with Credit Karma. I think any site that you're using that's a legitimate company, which Credit Karma is, to track your credit and see what's going on is a good thing, because when you're empowered, then that's always good to be an empowered consumer. Like I said, you should check also if you have a credit card. A lot of the credit card companies are letting you see your credit report for free as well. So Credit Karma does it. You can sign up there for free. A lot of the credit card companies let you see it for free. Any resources that you can have to track that and make sure that it's only you that's using your credit are always a bonus.
Great. Meg, we've had a lot of questions on different financial scams. Are there any other final tips you want to share with us about the work that you do? Are you there, Meg?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Awesome. Thank you. I think the only thing that would be important to add is I know that a lot of us are motivated because we love someone to get someone who's abusive out of their life, which makes sense, right? But unfortunately, the way that abusive people operate is because they want that control. They usually do what they can to keep it. And so we have to keep in mind that separation from an abusive person isn't always the only or the best solution. This is why we recommend safety planning and really trying to get a lot of information and working with a center like ours or with professionals on those resources. So sometimes when a person tries to leave an abusive relationship, for example, there can actually be an increased rate of physical violence leading up to a homicide. And so when we're offering advice and support to someone, we really just want to be good listeners, offer them options and resources, but not tell them what to do or give them an ultimatum. And really, you're going to want support probably from some of agencies like ours, domestic violence centers, sexual assault centers, on working through some of those nuances and helping someone safety plan, even if they're still in contact with an abuser, if they're living with an abusive person in the home. If you're afraid of abuse and you're not sure what to do, you can still safety plan and can still do that confidentially or yourself, or give that person the number to do safety planning. Thank you for asking, Andrea.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. We have one last quick question. Let me just scroll back up. Where is it? In the pandemic, is there any way to have the credit companies work to restore your credit? Tiffany, that sounds like a question for you.
It's not technically the credit agency's job to restore credit. They are simply a middleman between the consumer and the lenders. So whatever the lenders are reporting and whatever the consumers are applying for, that's how basically the credit reporting agencies work. So they're simply reporting what's happening on the credit. They're like a middleman. So they have no opinion either way with what's going on. If you have like LifeLock or a similar credit monitoring company, they would be the ones you would go to that would help you restore the credit. As well as there's several agencies out there that will help you go through and restore the credit. United Way is one of them that works with people if you've had, fraud or different things on there. Your bank or credit union should always be willing to help you, point you towards the right resources. So you really want to go that direction instead of trying to go, directly to the credit bureau and having them try to clean it up for you, because they're just simply a reporting agency. They don't have the tools to help you get that stuff off there.
Great, thank you. And I think this is one last question, then they're going to wrap it up. When someone tries to purchase an item on your bank account, the bank notifies you, and it isn't you, what happens to the person doing it? I guess it depends whether you know that person or not, right?
Yeah, so this is always going to be the question that nobody likes the answer to. The amount of resources to track down these people and figure out who it is are, it's basically a white collar crime. They just really don't have the resources to find these people. Most of the time, the bank or the company you have purchased from are taking the loss. So if somebody goes to Walmart and they didn't ID them and they used your credit card and they bought $1,000 worth of stuff, Walmart's going to take that loss on that. On the same aspect, if they came to the bank and they withdrew from our tellers and our tellers didn't do their due diligence, then the bank's going to take the fall for that. So there is a white collar crimes department with most law enforcement, but until you get over the $100,000 mark, they're really not chasing these people down. There's just not enough resources to do it. So at the end of the day, the bank or the company where the fraud was done are the ones that are taking the losses.
Great. Alex, can you put up the contact information slide, please? Everyone, thank you so much. We had over 150 some people join us today. People were wondering, can I share this link? So when you do get the follow-up email from our organizations, please do share it. I think knowledge is power. And by all means, please share. And I want to remind everybody on the phone number on the last slide here, 1-800-96-ABUSE. If there is any question that you feel that a neighbor, a friend, a loved one might possibly be a victim of any sort of abuse, financial exploitation, neglect, which is also self-neglect, you can call this number and make a report and do it anonymously. So I encourage you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about people that you're encountering in your neighborhood or at your church, or even in your, your community, to think about there are resources out there in the community. All of us here at our area agencies on aging and aging and disability resource centers, thank you for joining us today. We've got ElderSource, Senior Connection Center. Can you give me the other two? The Area Agency on Aging for Southwest Florida and the Area Agency on Aging for Palm Beach and Treasure Coast. Great resources. Our helplines are typically open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we have got great resources to share on our websites and social media platforms as well. So look for the link, please share it. And, think about those that you love that might need a little bit of this information to protect themselves. Everybody have a great day. It was great to be here.